should be, the next most important thing should be rest. Is that in short supply these days? Yes. So rest is number one when it comes to our activities. After rest, what should come next in the order of things? Because God is going to identify the night, and then he's going to work creating the light part of the day. So rest followed by work. Okay. So we don't have man there yet, but yes, worship is going to fall in place. After work comes play. So that is the cycle. We are putting worship aside for a little while. So it's rest followed by work followed by play. And I put play there because Adam kind of went among the animals and named them, interacted with them. So rest, work, play. But now Adam and Eve are created, and Adam sees all the animals first, and then Eve is brought to him. And what he said, whoa, was kind of a worship. Thank you, God. Does that make sense? So we have worship by celebrating God's actions, his creative power, followed by the seventh-day Sabbath, which continues the rest. But that is the cycle. Worship, rest, work, play. On the seventh day, it is multiplied. So in each day, we are supposed to find the time to rest. And in fact, it is strongly recommended that we identify periods within the day when we take mini breaks. Even if it's 5 minutes, when you simply walk away from your desk or something like that to get a breather. Take a break. Rest. And that taking place during the day helps us to relieve some of the stress so that by the time we get to sleep, we don't have the mountain on our shoulders that could have been there had we not taken those mini breaks. And then we come tonight after work and some play, we are going to sleep. So remember those cycles, and it is critical, and I believe it is scientifically associated with the solar system. So let me jump from that to what we do now that we know what the order should be. Mental disorders are usually associated with significant impairment. The reason these impairments happen is because we violate one of the principles associated with the orders I just mentioned. Is that biblical? Yes. Proverbs, the curse causeless never come. That is one reason. Of course, there's another reason, which is that there's genetic issues. So one of the main reasons, because about 90% of the diseases we suffer has to do with violation, choices we make, lifestyle we live. It's about 90%, according to one report. Therefore, most of what we are experiencing is not based on genetics. It's mostly because of the choices we make. There's also the issue of things happen in life that we had no control over. For example, a choice we didn't make is if we're abused by our parents or by someone else. Those were beyond our control. And you can see that the devil sometimes allows things to come across our path, as we can see right now that what is happening. The devil is fighting very hard for us not to, for this not to be as smooth an experience as we should have. So anyway, these disorders and disabilities in social, educational, occupational, or other important activities happen mostly because we choose badly. So we have these changes, dysfunction, and normally when I'm working with someone, I ask for them to identify something that changed suddenly, particularly over the last 3 or so months. What changed? And you can ask yourself too, if you are experiencing something and it seemed to have come from out of nowhere, go back. And usually you can put a finger on something that changed something significant. So, significant changes happen. It could be medical, it could be social, it could be economic, but something went wrong, something you may not have paid enough attention to, but it is most likely the straw that broke the camel's back. So it's going to start a process. And symptoms will start showing up. And I mentioned, someone asked a question yesterday, and I mentioned it. Your sleep issues will develop. Appetite issue. It is either way, too much or too little. And sleep can be too much or too little too. But either way, it's going to highlight something going wrong. Interest. You might be paying excessive interest in something or paying very little in something else. But some changes are going on. You may notice that you're a lot more impatient than you used to be. You're getting more angry than you used to be. Something that never used to irritate you now suddenly starts irritating you. Those are signs that something has changed, and it started somewhere. It didn't just come out of nowhere. The face of mental illness. There is no one face of mental illness, according to the Washington Post. It crosses every boundary you can imagine. Race, ethnicity, nationality. Everybody is experiencing high stress, either for a prolonged period of time or for a short time and back to normal. The issue with significant stress is mostly not how intense it was, although it can be significant. I'm going to come back to that. It usually is moderate to high that goes on for too long. In other words, there is no sign of the end. And when that starts happening, the brain starts looking for a way out. The mind starts looking for a way out. And it is going to take corrective measures. So I couldn't find much on the statistics for mental illness in Jamaica, but approximately 4% of the population experiences mental health issue. Now that is only that which was treated, which means I believe you could safely double it. And because usually most of those who are being affected by mental health issues don't get treated. So if it's 108,000 in 2016, I think I can safely say that a good 250,000 Jamaicans suffer from mental health issues. The same thing in the United States is about 25 million, and I safely, because most men are not going to get treated. And if you start with that, you're looking at a huge chunk of society that is not being treated. So, take a look at this collage, pictures. Could you identify which of these is suffering from mental illness? So someone said all of them. To one extent or not another, most of us go through a period of significant mental issue at one point. For example, if you have had someone who died close to you who died suddenly, for a period of 1 to 3 months at least, grief will have pushed you into some level of depression. Not yet, but it is significant grief. So we don't call it clinical depression at that point, but we call it situational depression, which means you're going to endure it, but in all likelihood you're going to deal with it and go back to normalcy. No, mental illness is not synonymous with depression. So you're looking at the full range from anxiety, where you're excessively nervous and worrying, from that, and you cannot prevent yourself from worrying, from feeling stressed, for being fearful. It's a full range to include someone who is off, not processing reality well. We call that person psychotic. So, because it is, we were raised with the idea, we socialized with the idea that a person who is suffering from mental health looks a certain way, and when we see normal people, we don't identify them as having mental illness, and as a result, we kind of transport that from them to us, and we say, since we don't look that bad, then we must be okay. Because we have an image of who should be suffering from mental health. So, what are some of the causes? We talked about a few. Genetics and sometimes the genetic impairment is so profound that hardly anything is going to prevent it from display itself, the mental illness that is. But most often, even with genetic, what we call predisposition, if we live a lifestyle according to the will of God, guess what? The genes remain quiet. And I make it a habit of mine to tell clients I'm going to work with, just because your mom had it or your dad had it, doesn't mean that you're going to have it. But it depends on your choices. It is very likely, but it is not. It is probably, but it is probable, but it is not. It's not definite. It's not a must. So it's probable, but it is not impossible for you to live without a display of that mental illness. So bullying, name calling, physical targeting, repeated focus, someone paying you unnecessary attention, undue attention you don't want, and you can't seem to find a way to get the person to leave you alone. Okay. All right. So we have witnessing or hearing about violence or being threatened with violence. A natural disaster. That can be a foundation for mental illness. We're so frightened by the tragedy that we may develop what we call PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. But the shock was so intense that we can't seem to get it out of our minds. Developmental delays can also be the beginning of stressful event. Let's say a child doesn't speak as early as he or she should, and this child now ends up going to child care centers or school, not speaking well. That impediment, you don't have to be teased to be traumatized. The very fact that you are different is going to create issues in the mind for the child. And that is one of the reasons why I don't know how we are going to attack this as a church, but when we identify these issues within the church, we have to start searching it and producing a way that can get us prepared to address these issues as early as possible, so that it doesn't balloon into a severe mental health issue later on in the child's life. So there's also physical and sexual abuse and major illness. A person who is suffering from chronic pain also is very likely to start developing, be it fears, worrying excessively, or feeling that this is not what they wanted life to be. So here's what I'm going to say. We are getting disturbance, and I know some of you are suffering with that. So pray in your mind that the devil will be controlled as we try to get this done. Amen? Just keep praying. So yesterday we looked at how trauma affects the brain, and I mentioned that grief. Let me throw some things at you. If you had a dog that was more than a dog to you, and that dog died, do you think you're going to experience grief? Yes. You know, so I know when I was growing up, pets didn't mean much to me. They lived and they died. But I grew to understand how significant a pet can be in the life of a human being. They are constant companions. So grieving affects the brain, as does trauma, in that the three critical areas again that I looked at yesterday. The prefrontal cortex, colored in blue, and the orange, like number 2, the anterior cingulate cortex, which regulates emotional expression, and the amygdala, that is where a lot of emotional expression emanates from or resides in. Those three are affected. The prefrontal cortex gets depressed. If it goes on for too long, it's going to start shrinking. The number 2 gets depressed also. It is functioning lower than normal, which means it's not exerting the control over the amygdala that it would normally. That leaves the amygdala, the center of emotion, especially negative emotion, is running wild. And at that point, we are going to be in trouble. I'm going to say this, might be a little unpopular, but let me say this, folks. Be very careful of emotional religion. May not mean anything to you. Be careful of excessively emotional religion. And I'll explain why. I'm working with a little boy right now who is from, let's just say, a certain religious orientation, disposition. And he was allowed from very early to participate in euphoric expressions. That euphoric expressions is inevitably going to elevate the amygdala over the anterior cingulate cortex and the frontal lobe. Guess what? It is my theory, and I believe I'm correct. I've not done any scientific brain monitoring to say so, but based on what I've seen before, and some studies that show that those who participate excessively in those activities tend to elevate the emotional sector of the brain above the reasoning, rational part. So guess what? When he gets angry, he doesn't get something that he wants. The language towards his mother is the dirtiest you can imagine. Why is that? Because when he is normal, he is very affectionate to her. He treats her with respect. He's kind. He's giving her stuff. But gets angry, which means emotion takes over. And this part of the brain is nowhere in sight. Euphoric expression is where excessively your emotional expression is not controlled by your rational part. So we're talking about prolonged expression of hallelujah, what we call glossolalia, speaking in tongues, that kind of stuff. Anything that you can relate closely to that is something you have to be concerned about how long it goes for. Because if it goes on for too long and too often, you're going to elevate a part of the brain above the control center, which means you can lose it and you don't even know you've lost it. Am I making sense? All right, bear that in mind. So, yes. Okay, start the question again, please. Can you give her the mic?
Who have that particular issue where the emotions, they are the emotional part of the brain, the amygdala, is exerting greater control than the prefrontal cortex. How do you assist that person to come back to a quote-unquote normal state of being?
Very good question. Okay, so reasoning, complex thought processes, calculating, processing data, that needs to return. So what you do is gently start moving the person away from I think, or I believe, or I feel. You don't give a person the opportunity to express those. What you do is go work with the person on the basis of very specific facts. For example, how long did God take to create the earth? Taking it for granted that this person is a religious person. So you go through the Bible with questions that directs the person to respond with a fact. It's a drill that you have to keep going on over and over, so the person remains in reality. It's facts, facts, facts. And over time, with other things that need to come into play, the person will shift from I believe, I think, or I feel, to I know. Yes, so that is part of the other thing that I'm talking about. So we're a little ahead, but let me deal with it since we're there. What happens is, for me, I normally start with the responses that we'll come to in a little while, where you ask the person about sleeping, and you start ensuring that the person is getting enough sleep. You start with the 2 hours before sleep, actually. Then sleep, then waking up on time. So you start going to bed at a certain time, aiming for 7 to 8 hours. You start waking up at a very specific time. So you're becoming very routine. You're eating at around the same time on a 1 hour spread. Let's say 7 to 8 every day. That's about the time you're going to eat. You're going to look for the mini breaks that I talk about. You're drinking enough water too. So for me, I will tell them half an hour before you eat, you drink a glass of water. 2 hours after you've eaten, another glass of water. Half an hour before the next meal, a glass of water. 2 hours after that meal, and so on. So because dehydrated brain doesn't work at its best. And that is very often a part of the issue. So I put that in place. It's not going to be an issue here because sunlight is everywhere. But very often when people are suffering from issues of any kind, mental health, they tend not to go outside as often as they should, which means that the sunlight's melanin, creation of melanin, melatonin for feeling good, and not melatonin but serotonin, and melatonin for sleeping well and rebuilding and so on. All of those take a hit, and therefore a lot of things are going wrong. So you start with a system that is very regimented, because what you're trying to do is to bring the person's life back to order. And if that routine is followed, the person is within 2 weeks, the person will start showing improvement. And that has been my experience, if it is followed very, very carefully. So then you work with facts, and I'm going to let me add this just before you come in. Part of the issue is also that the person who normally is experiencing mental health issue is a person who is not experiencing love. Yes, ma'am. So let me pause here for a little and explain something. There are two things that resemble each other very well. One is love, the other is affection. They're not the same. You will find affection when you find love, but you can find affection and no love. Most people have never and will never experience love, because it comes from God and it is own. You know, people take me on for this, but it's very biblical, and I believe it is good enough for me. You cannot find love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, meekness, faith, temperance without God. 1 Corinthians 13 cannot exist without God. Therefore, what God has allowed us implanted in us. By the way, Genesis chapter 3:15, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head. In that is a religious expression, but it is God planting in every human being the capacity to receive and give love. But it's not going to come without submission to God. So, affection, if it feels good, you respond nicely to it. That is affection. If it tastes good, smell good, look good, feel good, we affect it. That's where the word affection comes from. We respond nicely to it. When it doesn't look good, taste good, smell good, feel good, what do? We turn away from it. That is why so many relationships break up easily. It wasn't based on love, most of them. They were based on affection. God planted that, made it available to us, so with the hope that we will move. If we didn't start with him with love, we would move from affection to love, and find what real joy is about. You were going to ask a question.
I wanted to ask to the other side if there can be an imbalance with persons using the frontal lobe and the middle lobe too well, and there are no expression of emotion.
Yes.
And is it the same like in cases? Do you find more where the emotional is used, and that leads to there's an imbalance in the emotional expression,
yes,
as opposed to the frontal thinking expression?
Okay. So before I answer that, in the emotional expression, one of the reasons why I warned against excessive emotional expression in religious circles is that you will find children who are just crying, and nothing seems to stop them. And then there are children who are just sad. From childhood, there is a sadness on the face that never seems to go away. We call it dysthymia, which is a chronic sadness. Can't find any other word to describe it at this point. But when you cannot regulate your emotions, it is a sign of mental illness. In other words, we're not supposed to cry we're not supposed to cry in most instances when we're happy. We're not supposed to be sad when we get something good. Do you see what I'm saying? We respond appropriately. So if someone is sad inappropriately, have you ever seen someone laughing over something that person should be crying about? Dysregulation is what we call it. The person is not well regulated. And so the balance, yes. God talks about happiness in heaven when one soul has come to God. Is not there? Yeah. God grieves. He does a lot of things that reflect affection. And therefore, we are supposed to have a balance, not excessive, rational, where everything comes down to a dry presentation, as we have in some religious circles too, where no emotion is expressed. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for enough reason behind our expressions of emotion. And that is how the balance is maintained. And so, how do you guard against excesses on either side? It is simply to find love. Because when love takes over, balance is restored. And I may add this quickly. Every human being who is doing something is either trying to find love or to give it. There's no other way around it. Because once we receive it from God, we confirm that we have received it by giving love to someone else. And if we don't have it, all we're doing is searching for love. because we sense deep within that something is missing and we're trying to correct it. So the balance is a time to laugh, a time to play, a time to cry. Do you know that passage in the Bible? Yes. We make sure that we go through these situations where we cry when it's time to cry, we laugh, we have fun, we play, we crack a few jokes about ourselves, preferably, instead of laughing at someone else, and keep that going. So these are some of the symptoms that indicate a slide has started. Sleep and appetite disturbance. Let me read them because there are some issues with seeing the slides. Oppositional and defiant behavior, angry outbursts, suicidal thoughts, lack of focus, low motivation or loss of interest, loss of emotional control, fearful and worrying, isolation, clinging, or detached behavior. Detached, you will go close to someone or say something to them and they react as if you don't exist. And it's we are no longer processing as the normal person. Yes.
With persons, I find that many persons that are imbalanced mentally, they have control issues.
Yes.
Yes, they want to control everything, and when they cannot control everything, it causes an imbalance. I don't know if that has been your experience.
Okay, so control is at the surface, but below the control is a deep fear of what may happen in a certain situation that they may not be able to deal with. Fear is eating away. What does the Bible say? Perfect love does what? If you are experiencing undue fear, and I'm just being safe by saying undue because I don't want to sound absolutist, but if you're experiencing fear, it might hit you because that's the temptation of the devil. But the Christian is supposed to take control of that temptation from the devil and say, God, I know you're in control. Something to that effect, which returns you to dealing with reality. Because yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. None. So yes, control is one of the signs that you see. People are trying to create the situation in a way that will make the situations livable. But you go into situations as a Christian, you don't know what to expect, but you're still at ease because God is in control. Were you going to say something? Okay. So I'm going to look at some cases at this point, and don't be afraid to ask questions because I don't want this to be a monologue where I'm the only one talking. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Yesterday I was saying when you don't get enough sleep, it causes headache and so on. So, all right, I have another question.
Okay, let me say.
Another question is, how long what type of food or so should you eat to cause you not to get
not to become insomnia is the word, but to have issue with sleep.
No, not really sleep.
Encourage you to sleep.
Dementia and so on.
Oh, dementia. Dementia, there are medical issues surrounding that, but any of the issues where you endure stress for longer than you should at a high enough level is going to cause certain processes to start. So let me pick on sleep. When, according to one sleep study that I looked at, they took some college students and had them go sleep deprived, no more than 4 hours of sleep for 4 nights in a row. After 4 nights, guess what? Their responses were as if they were drunk people.
Alzheimer's would be the same thing as dementia.
Dementia is the broad umbrella. Alzheimer's is one of the specific diseases that will be under that umbrella. So, what we know also is with those 4 nights of only 4 hours of sleep, not only is the person drunk, but the brain is going to set in motion some processes. One, it's going to release stress hormones, which have certain effects. One, your blood pressure is going to increase because your blood is going to get thicker. And these are the reasons. With a stress response, it releases adrenaline. Adrenaline triggers the release of sugar. More sugar in the blood means the blood is thicker than it should be. And particularly for a prolonged period of time, it's not good. So more sugar, it releases some fiber into the blood because the brain is preparing you to be in a position where if you get a cut, you don't bleed to death. So it's preparing your blood to clot quicker than it normally would. So all of that done makes the blood thicker. The heart is going to have to pump harder because your blood pressure is going to go up. With your blood pressure going up, you're going to have, if it stays there for too long, you're going to have difficulty sleeping. It is by design. The body is trying to save us. The brain and everything is trying to save the system. But unfortunately, if we don't respond appropriately to it, it's going to go on for over a period of time. It's going to become corrosive. So sleep is going to be affected. And with that, reduced oxygen is part of the issue because the blood is not going to flow as fast as it should. With less oxygen going to the brain activity is going to slow down. And that is why if you smoke or do anything that impairs circulation, folks, look at yourself and ask yourself, is my circulation as best as it could be? If the answer is no, you need to take steps to make sure that you are in the best of shape because anything that slows down your circulation is going to weaken your brain and make it more likely that you'll develop dementia. So what type of food? Eating right, sister. Make sure you eat a balanced meal, fruits and vegetables and a balanced meal. Stay away from fat and high sugar. Stay away from excessive protein. There's no reason for any human being to eat a half of a chicken one sitting. And a whole bunch. She's saying, what? No, there's no need for it. It's only putting more weight on the system. So think about anything. Smoking, alcohol use, excessive sugar, excessive fat. By the way, let me add one more thing. The body makes its own cholesterol. About 70 to 80% the last time, if my memory serves me right, but it's 70 and above cholesterol, its own cholesterol. It doesn't need cholesterol from food. Guess what? When we are stressed, the body is forced to make more cholesterol. And that is why a thin person can have a heart attack and it's not genetic. Why? Because the person is so stressed you don't know it because the person looks fit. But it's making excessive cholesterol on and on and on and it's not going to use it up. So some of it is deposited in our veins, blocks the heart, veins in the brain, you get aneurysm or a stroke or a heart attack. Do you understand? So the whole system depends on us doing what is right. Exercising, eating right, forgiving your brother when they do something against you. Let it go. Do you know that unforgiving spirit makes your body produce more cholesterol? Yes. The system senses it and it is going to respond by saying something is wrong, let me try to correct it. And part of that correction is to make more cholesterol because it believes it's going to need the hormones to deal with the issue. Does it make sense? Yeah. So, and that is why God says, the Bible says, heap coals of fire. Now, you don't go out to hurt people by doing good to them. You understand? So it's just saying, do good and leave the rest to God. He will turn it into whatever he wants. and so on. I saw a hand. Did I see a hand? No. Okay. We all grew up seeing older people do, and as a result, we do the same thing without thinking. So it may simply be a cultural practice, or it could be that whatever is affecting the person is creating enough tension in the brain, and that's that person's response. I'm not sure, but it could simply be a cultural practice too. That's the way we bawl, as we say, or cry. All right, so let me deal with the first issue. This was about 2.5 years ago. Mother and her 17-year-old son came to me, and it was interesting because he would not remove his hood from his head, and I couldn't see his face. He had on dark glasses too, and he wouldn't look at me. And Mom said that he looks at nobody, he goes nowhere, he's in his room. And then, talking to him and her, she explained that he was verbally abused, bullied when he was in 5th grade. The teachers called him ugly, but I learned later that some of the most brutal names to describe an ugly person was used by the mother against him, towards him, and it was very hurtful. But she did something also that compounded the whole thing, which is she bought him a video game set. And so he spent 12 or more hours sometimes in his room playing video games. Be very watchful about your children. I know everybody's handing a cell phone to a 2-3-year-old. Folks, if I were you, I'd be very cautious about how quickly I hand a cell phone to a child. It is overstimulating the brain in ways that we very often will regret, in my humble opinion. But anyway, so, yes, science is backing it up because the colors, the screen of the cell phone is designed to addict, meaning the color is so beautiful. Plus, we know about blue light, designed to keep us awake. Do you understand how marvelous and all the works? That also includes new proper trust. Anyway, 11 I was shocked out of my clothes. The young man took everything I said and went home and gave up video game and started getting over the depression. I said, praise be to God. He had dropped out of high school in 10th grade. He was very smart. He was a twin, one of 2 twins, and was the smarter of the 2. And the other one was doing well, holding a job while attending high school. Great effort on the part of a young person. And now he wants to go back to school, but it's too late. And I had 3 months thereabout to work with him. I think he came back in November, and he was going to age out of the system because I was working in an organization where we only saw some people up to age 18, and he was going to age out of it. So I had about 3 months to work with him, and we worked hard. I started teaching him how to play the guitar, getting him ready to get his driver's license, and his mom was so excited. After 3 months, he was getting ready to do his GED, and he had his driver's license, and he had a job. For the first time, someone walked into my office with a bag of gifts. I appreciate it so much. The lady saying to me, because the boy who was, and the issue too was that she was a single mother. Hispanic lady, she was so excited. I talked to one of my Hispanic co-workers and said that, it's against the rules to accept gifts. What do I do? She said, you don't know what you will be doing by rejecting that. You have to accept it. And I accepted the gift. She went on her happy way. Boy had returned to life. So that was the first one. The second one was from a 17-year-old. And again, if you have a question, don't be afraid to ask. 17-year-old is a white kid, Caucasian, and he's afraid of almost everything in sight. Girls, bees, and he is getting ready to graduate from high school. And he is also a Christian, which helps all the time. When you come across someone who understands the Bible to some extent and believes, and I gave him the thought, which is to be found in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. When you get a chance, folks, read and digest that chapter. 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Verse 7, 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Verse 7 says, we walk not by sight, but by faith. In other words, when you see crazy things happening around you, you don't have to accept it. You can remind yourself that God did something. And chapter 17 says, as it's because of that 17 is so important. 17 says that if any man is in Christ, he is a new creature. You have to hang on to it for dear life, because sometimes you're not going to feel like a new creature. And that new creature, you know, Paul kind of wrote the beginning at the end when he says in verse 21 that Christ became sin for us. Meaning that I don't think we Seventh-day Adventists and Christians in general understand what Christ did on the cross. The statement that Christ became sin for us means that every sin you have committed from birth and will commit until you die has been already taken from you by Christ. Every single one, all your pain, your suffering, your sin has been taken by Christ. The only issue is you don't get the benefit until you accept the forgiveness. You go through the repentance. You understand what I'm saying? It has already been taken from you. Christ didn't leave anybody with any sin when he went to the cross and to the grave. But the benefit only accrues when we recognize it and accept it. So I went through that with him. I said, you do realize you can't fail. Meaning, Christ has already taken care of anything. So if you're going somewhere and you knew you couldn't lose or you couldn't fail, would you worry? And he said, you're right. I did some things. I sent him to collect dead insects. Bees and wasps and all of that stuff in a transfer. I mean, they don't teach us these kind of things in graduate school. Get a plastic bag and collect all these, and I want you to interact with it. Touch it, because you know it's not going to hurt you. And after he had done that for a while, I then asked him to catch a bee, a live bee, and the nature of that kind of fear is that until you expose yourself to it, you're not going to get rid of it. So he had to catch the wasp and the bee, put it in the plastic bag and interact with it, realize that it is just an insect. And after 3 months, he had gotten ready to, he wouldn't drive, by the way. Yeah, and got in a car. His dad finally bought him the car. He got his driver's license, and he was no longer afraid of girls. He felt confident enough that he could now pursue his life normally. So, yes.
In your practice, are you finding that there's an increase in the amount of mental illness among young people in this time?
Yes. The question is mental illness. By the way, I just sat through a seminar last week where I believe the two largest growth spurt of the brain happens 0 to 1 and then 11 to 14. Watch for your young people who are between the ages of 11 and 14 during this pandemic. Because this pandemic is going to, in my opinion, affect brain growth. So what we have noticed is more fear of dying among young people. Fear of interacting socially. Threat of committing suicide and attempting suicide. When you hear about anybody in solitary confinement, you will never be able to imagine what it's doing to the brain. COVID has created a worldwide solitary confinement in many ways. Am I making sense? We were locked down, and as a result of not being able to pursue our social interaction and physical activities, it did something to the mind. Now, I will say this. Jamaica, and I said it yesterday, Jamaica and other tropical countries and places where you're not as confined did well because a lot of, with the sun and the, climate and so on, activities went on. But I don't believe it got rid of everything that affected the mind during this time. Do you understand me? Some of it has to be addressed by going at it directly. I saw a hand before. Yes. Yes.
I read something about solitary confinement, and the person was saying that's the worst kind of punishment you could ever have because they are just trapped with their own thoughts, and they're not able to talk or relate to anybody. That's the worst kind of punishment that could ever do to somebody.
Yes, yes. The deprivation of social contact is it is unimaginable what it is doing to us. So solitary confinement, and that is kind of what we experience with COVID. So anyway, looking at the next one, any question? Remember, you can just raise your hand. 5-year-old. When I got this kid, I worked with him for about a year and a half, and the child spoke like a grandfather and behaved like a grandfather, and it was partly the mom's fault. Dad was a big part of it too, because the mom boasted and laughed and joked around how his behavior resembled her father's, and as a result, he became what we call conditioned to behave that way. And I'm going to say this generally: be careful of what you laugh about when your children do certain things, because you're preparing them to continue doing it. Anything we get satisfaction from, we have a tendency to repeat. So, anyway, so I talked with him one day in a session. His mom complained that she put him to stand in a corner for 1 hour, and he still won't stop doing his rude, disrespectful, defiant behavior. His father was teaching him to ride a bicycle one day, and he got angry. And the father says, I'm going to just give away the bicycle or something. He says, big deal. A 5-year-old. So anyway, mom talked, and I asked him, I said, you have a choice between standing in the corner and obeying your mom. Which would you do? The boy didn't blink. He looked at me and he said, I will stand in the corner. And I knew I had trouble on my hand. So I went on. I discovered, after interacting with his older 16-year-old brother, that mom and dad went at it like puss and dog. Cat and dog, for those who are online. And he used the most abusive language to her, and she responded in kind. Dad was his hero. So all the dirty, nasty things Dad was saying about mom, he took Dad's side and was defiant towards mom. And we worked, some improvement, but not much. About a year into it, I started testing him. There were some slight improvements by that time, and I started testing him with playing him card games, Uno with him. And I started allowing him to beat me so that he could feel good, but then I would beat him to help him to deal with his anger. But mom, again, is a bad element in the whole thing. One day I'm doing it, and mom is in the room, and I allowed him to beat me twice. Once he beat me because he learned very quickly. So he beat me, and he bragged and all bragged, trash talk, and mom is goading him along with the trash talk. And the next round, I deliberately beat him, and he got angry. And the mother started saying, why are you angry? You were just laughing and joking, bragging when you were beating Mr. Bennett. Why are you angry now? The boy looked at his mom and he said, if you would only shut up. And in situations like those, I have to fight hard not to behave like a parent. It's hard to remain a counselor in those situations. If you would only shut up. So I asked the mom to leave the room, and I talked to him, and I sensed that is a sign of a child that has undergone abuse. So I cuddled him for a little while and then sent him to sit near his dad. But it didn't take long, because as soon as I started telling him what to do, like get some crayons and color and all of that stuff, he started resisting. And about the second session, I did something unthinkable. And I have to praise God, because none of these things backfired in my face. I told the dad to leave the room because he was misbehaving, he wanted to go out with his dad, and I pulled my chair at the door and I sat. And he was trying to kick me, he was trying to punch, he was trying to... And I sat him out and blocked and all of that for about 20 minutes. And I saw a shift in his eyes and his behavior. And as soon as I see those shifts, I have to take advantage. Once I saw the shift, I said, would you like to go to the room next door where there are a lot of toys so we can select some toys? And he said yes. And at that point, I knew I had won the game. From then on, he's going to resist, but it's going to get less and less. And after about 9 months to a year, he was ready for adoption. They tried it too early after about 6 months the first time, and he was not ready. You can't introduce a child who's been abused to a total stranger that quickly. You have to gradually introduce the child. And so the child doesn't, get what we call activated or triggered, where he remembers the abuse from people who were not his mom or dad, and he gets frightened by it and runs away. So, you have to be very perceptive and see the signs, work with it, and then when you see the opening, you take it. Because after a while, we played, ball in the office and all. He's, bouncing the ball to me, I'm bouncing, getting him. And the surprising thing about it is he was so smart. He's a kid who could color at 5 and never cross the line. 5 years old. Unbelievably smart, but had he not been treated, that abuse would have sat in his brain to turn him into possibly a criminal, and so on. So maybe that is enough at this point. Any question? So let's jump from that to our choices. You have to take control of your life and look at yourself, and like I said earlier, and ask, am I living my best life for God? By the way, if you really love yourself, you will live your best life for you and for God and for others. Am I making sense? If I have low self-esteem, I cannot love myself. Agree or disagree? You cannot give somebody what you don't have. If I'm low on myself, it means that I don't have the estimate of me that God has of me. I'm not experiencing love. So low self-esteem needs the correcting power of the love of God. And some of that will not happen until we face ourselves through counseling. So choices. What we eat, what we drink, how we sleep, when we sleep, whether we exercise or not, our interaction with people, all of those are important choices that we're going to have to make. If we give up that choice, it is hardly likely that anything good is going to happen by accident. Yes?
Yes. As we talk about a lot of things, but behavior, the behavioral pattern.
Yes.
As a Christian, you could explain how I'm supposed to behave myself.
You're trying to get me in trouble here, brother. You're trying to get me in trouble. Love.
Before God, you know. I'm saying behave myself before God.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Yes. What God expects from us, Brother George, is loving behavior, patience, moderation, humility, being merciful, kind, thinking above others above ourselves, not worrying about the future or today because God has already taken care of it. Those are the actions. The community that we are supposed to have in the church is such that the world will see something they don't have and will want to get it. But they will know they can't have it unless they become part of the church, and so many of them will come into the church. That is the community that is supposed to exist here. When a few adults and myself were raising our children, Brother McLaren is going to be here this weekend, and his wife. He and I and about 8 other parents got together and formed what we called Families Forever. We were determined to raise our children as good Seventh-day Adventists and productive citizens in the world. So we took it upon ourselves to meet every other week after church, although we went to different churches. And we had lunch together, and then we studied and significantly targeted the children. We did things for the children. We remained a tight-knit community. Holidays, we went to the park together. If someone was going to be out of town, we knew each other well enough. They could leave their children with me. I could leave my children with them. If there was work to be done around the house, we all came together on a Sunday morning and we helped renovation. If there was a single mom in the group who needed yard to be cut or some painting, we all came together and we cut the yard and we paint if it was transportation to school, everybody pitched in. We were a family together for 23 years. When we told people about that unit, people still can't believe it. We even went on a cruise together. It was so good. We raised not a single one of those children that stayed with the group failed to complete college. None of them left the church. We have some wavering going on now, but none of them left the church before leaving college. There's none that is completely out, but there are things happening with young people now that it's just they are seeing things different than we are seeing them, and I will just be this past generation and this one is not going to put up with a lot of the hypocrisy that we project in the church. Did you hear me, folks? You didn't hear me. They're not going to look you in the eye and allow you to get away with the hypocrisy like we used to do. When I was growing up, there was hypocrisy around, but we simply grinned, smiled, and turned a blind eye. This generation and the one that is maybe 10 to 13 right now is not going to put up with it. Internet and the cell phone has made them more outspoken than we were and more outspoken in some case than they should. And they're a lot more blunt. So as a result, they're seeing things that they know should not be in the church, and it is turning many of them off. Am I trying to say that they're not to be blamed? No, they're making their choices, and I happen to believe it's very bad choices they're making. Because where they're going is nowhere better than what is in here. Am I making sense? This is where it is. And under no circumstance would I give up what I found in the Adventist church. Under no circumstance. But anyway, so where was I? So anyway, so we have choice. We talked about rest. And we know what it does to the mind. Your environment. Your home in and of itself can be a stressful environment. For example, if you put too much furniture in your home, it is too cluttered, it will cause stress to the brain. So studies show, for example, that people who drive on main heavy traffic areas, streets, to work, compared to those who can take shortcuts in the wooded area, there's a huge difference in how they feel by the time they get to work. The person who drives among trees and along the ocean view and all of that, less stressed than the person who is in heavy traffic. So your environment is very significant. And it's not just, I don't know how we do it here in Jamaica, but you know, everywhere you turn, it's the same reggae music. I'm sorry, folks, but I don't know how we escape it. But you have to find a way, when you get away from it, to turn on something very pleasant and soothing that talks about the love of God, so that the brain can come back down to calm and normalcy. So your environment is very critical, and I work with that with activity. We have a lot of it here. Take advantage of it. Walking, going to the beach on a Sunday morning and other times. Taking a break, Sister Ava. Get involved. Inactivity is a killer. There is a study that shows that if a person were to walk 5 days per week, about 30 to 40 minutes per day, 5 days per week, 30 to 40 minutes per day, there is hardly any disease that would not change. None mental, none physical. No gym, no nothing. Just walking. 30 to 40 minutes per day, 5 days per week. Depression starts disappearing, if not disappearing. In fact, one of the highlights from it is a teenager who walks regularly during teenage years has 40% less likelihood of developing breast cancer by the time they get to the 50s. Walking during teenage years, 40% less likelihood of developing breast cancer when they become postmenopausal in their early 50s, that kind of thing. So, huge difference in how it affects the brain. So you can know though, because walking increases circulation, includes food, increases the availability of food to the brain, and oxygen. And as a result, the brain remains very vibrant, and oxygen gets to the other part, the rest of the body. So likelihood of staying the same way is very difficult. Trust. I said it yesterday. The person who trusts in God, believes strongly in their religion, they don't get sick as often, they don't stay sick as long, they recover faster, and after surgery, they heal faster. So it is God-embedded science, serious science, in the principles by which we have been instructed, or in which we have been instructed. So that's trust in God, interpersonal relationship. There are some things that are only released in our body when we are touched by another human being, or when another human being smiles at us. Interpersonal relationship helps to maintain good mental health. That is a big part of the benefit of being part of a church community. Cannot say it enough. The Lord said, it is not good that man should be alone. Isolating ourselves doesn't help. Outlook. You know, we have a tendency to become very defensive when we come across something that's new, especially when it doesn't look like something we are accustomed to. And as a result, we tend to recoil from people and things without even waiting to find out if it's a positive thing that we are being offered. We have to learn to assume that any action on the part of someone is with good intention. Hello, folks? In other words, even if it sounds bad, the person must have meant good. So Give the person the benefit of the doubt. Because if you don't, you are likely to end up robbing yourself of a lot of positive in the process. Great things that God had for you, but just because it didn't sound right at the first and you rejected it, you're missing out on blessings from God. Does it make sense? So, positive. Positive. Think about what God has in mind. Nutrition, of course, is the last. We ran a program, many of you may have heard about Creation Health. In 2 weeks after going through these steps with some people in the community, a doctor is able to get some patients off certain medication. In fact, it was so impressive that one doctor asked her patient, "Where do you get this information from?" And she was told that we operate on the basis of certain things and we have a cookbook that we are following. The doctor says, "Please, I'd like to buy one of those cookbooks." A medical doctor. It is, God has given us more than enough for us to be like Moses. I have lost nothing since the day I was born, except maybe the sin that the devil had planned cast on me. So, nutrition, very critical. We don't need to eat a lot of the fried, fatty food, folks. We don't need to eat a lot of the sugar. And I'll end with this. I was in the emergency room maybe 4 years ago. I was working there at the time, and a young lady came into the room, into the emergency room, and they called me to work with her. It's assessment, and then while she's waiting to be transferred out, that's how we do it. You might work with them to see, I work with them to see if I could adjust their mental outlook, because they're either going to be discharged to go see a counselor patient, or they're going to be transferred to a mental hospital for maybe 5 days to stabilize. So anyway, I went in and she told me her story, and my heart started bleeding for her. She was 27. She had been alcoholic since she was 17. She had a son, 8 years old, and her son's father, although they were no longer in a relationship, used to just walk into the house some days and would brutalize, kick, beat her, sometimes right there in front of the child. She had gone into rehab several times, nothing worked. AA, nothing worked. And I looked at her almost crying. In some of those situations, you have to really force the tears to stay away. And I'm saying this lady needs a little more than just pure psychology at this time. And I opened my mouth and I told her, John chapter 12, verse 32, "And if I be lifted up, I shall draw all men unto me." And I told her, we have often explained that means if you look to God, Jesus, he will draw you to him, but it is that and way more. Jesus says Adam took us into sin without our permission. He gave us pain and suffering without our permission, and he gave us death without our permission. And Jesus said, I, the second Adam, will do 3 steps similarly. I will take your sin from you without your permission, take you to the cross without your permission in me, and take you to the grave with me, in me, without your permission. Just as the first Adam did. And Jesus said, though, 1 step can only be taken with your permission. I am going to come from the grave, and you only come with me from the grave if you accept that I am the Savior of your life. And I told her that, and she started laughing and crying all at once. I said, God, Jesus took all your sins, pain, and suffering from you. Today, unlike Alcoholics Anonymous that says once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, I say you can look the devil in his eyes and say, I was an alcoholic. And she couldn't stop crying and laughing. She could not believe. Your stuff, pain, suffering, everything has been buried in the grave. It's left there. And I cracked a corny joke. The only way you get it is if you love to thief from the grave. steal from the grave. I asked her, do you want to continue to be a grave robber? She accepted the gift of Jesus. I believe she left there believing that she was going to kick the habit of alcohol. And with that, I praise God that I was able to make a difference once more in the life of someone, lifting the burden, allowing her to allow Jesus to keep the burden that he had already taken from her. Amen? And I pray that as we walk, being Christians, we will leave the burdens where they belong, in the grave. Because Jesus left them there buried. And all he has to give us, even though life may appear difficult, we have to remember that those are just actions of the devil trying to make us deny the fact that Jesus has done so much from us. And when they happen, over and over, all to Jesus I surrender. Over and over. He is my Redeemer, and I have nothing to be afraid. Thank you for listening. Do you have a question? The slide before that. Trust in God. Yep. Live up to 7 years longer than the average person. Seventh-day Adventists in general, in the United States at least, live on average between 7 to 10 years longer than the average population, and still in good shape. Question?
Yes, Mike. Just a comment before the question. I think that all Seventh-day Adventists should get a taste of this. In Jamaica, in our conferences, I find that there's a lack of information. And when people have their issues and their problems, we can't get true help. It's just trying a little thing, ask God to deal with it, just ask the Lord to help you to forgive the person, stuff like that. You know, we need these kind of sessions in our churches to open up the eyes of those of us who can't see, and of those of us who are seeing but don't want to believe. Okay. Question, how would you evaluate someone who, I would call it double personality, where they're one person here and they're another there?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in all likelihood, it's not necessarily a double personality, but what we do is play two roles without having one affect the other or influence the other, if you want, because we play roles in life. I'm not the same in here as I'm in my house, but I have not gotten rid of my principles in my house. Do you understand? So we play roles, but the problem is the principles that I operate with in church is not supposed to leave me at my house or when I go to work. Exactly. So we're supposed to be governed by that. So how do you deal with that? Yeah. We start with the assessment, and you have to find something that the person doesn't want to keep. Let me put it that way. Because unless the person wants to get rid of something, you don't usually have a starting point. And so let me explain it another way. When we are having issues, we fall into four categories, and they overlap. One is we have too much of something or too little of something. Or we have something we want to get rid of and we can't get rid of it, and something we want to get and we can't get. So too much or too little, want, can't get, or have that we don't want and we want to get rid of it. So if I could, that is my how I put things together. If I can find someone who falls into any one of those, so I would have to assess based on the sleep, eating, and all of those. And if I find some areas, usually if something is going wrong in someone's life, one of those symptoms is going to show up. So once I identify, one is not enough to create an issue. So we're going to look for maybe at least 4. But if the person wants to get rid of something that person has, it's a starting point, because now he has some motivation to work. A person who does not want to change is not a person you can change. So once the person is assessed and we come to agreement that he wants to change this thing, it doesn't necessarily mean the thing that is the main issue. All we want is I want is a starting point. Because we are going to go from there to show the connection between that thing that the thing he needs to address is over here, but he's focused on this one. That's fine. We'll start here, but it's going to end up here anyway. And that is how we have to work, to gradually get the person to accept that change is necessary.
So the first thing is acceptance that something is wrong, and needing to change. But what if this is an individual who does not want anyone to know that they exist in that way?
Yes. Such a person, when the person comes face to face with someone who is very authentic, genuinely concerned about his or her personal interest, his or her, he can sense love. He can sense that this person knows what he's talking about. In the face of those, people have a tendency to relax because they're not threatened. So that is the atmosphere you create, not pushing too hard at first. And the person starts developing trust, little by little. Very often I tell people about my own experience, struggles I went through, and how God worked miracles. But I do it in a measured way so that I'm not taking over the session. It is my stuff, but just to encourage people to know that I'm not riding on a white horse and I've never been on the ground, if you understand what I'm saying. So, but there has to be a starting point. And with that, we will work gently towards the main goal. And eventually, that person is going to realize that life is not heading in the right direction because your brain is being damaged while you're waiting. So hopefully we will get there. But if the person doesn't get there, change is not going to happen. Okay. And it happens. Yes. So it has to be, and it's a pity because some kind of what we would call peer counseling could be developed in the churches where trusted roundtable activities go on and so on. And one of the things that break the barrier down very quickly is when we can share with each other our own sufferings that we feel safe about. And it could simply be a matter of how tragic it was when my mom died, how I suffered. And we all talk about that kind of loss. When those are expressed in a group, it is hard for there to be a dry face. I remember attending a seminar on depression, and there were about 6 of us around a table, and we worked through certain things, and towards the end, we were asked to form that group and share our greatest loss. I talked about, I don't remember what I talked about, but I felt embarrassed after I'd said mine when I heard about a lady whose, I believe, her mom died, her daughter died of cancer, a son-in-law, something to that effect, in a tragic accident. We were all crying, even though we had met them for the first time that day, each other. You understand what I'm saying? The bond around suffering develops quickly and strong. And if we were to do that, it could be a starting point to heal a lot of the suffering in the church. Yeah.
Yes.
One last thing, and then it's connected with what I'm saying. The one thing that I think we shouldn't do as members, as a church family, and I might be wrong, so I'm asking for advice. We know that someone is doing something wrong. The person is probably having a mental issue, and we know it is wrong, but we side with the person. Should we be siding with someone who is hurting someone else? How do you deal with that?
Okay, it's not getting too subjective here, but very often we don't have sufficient information. We don't have it, and we are afraid that we might step on the wrong tile. Let's just put it that way. And start a cascading effect in the wrong direction. So out of fear, we remain seated. So it's going to take a lot of prayer and organizing with God and recognizing that what is not sufficient. And ask God to start the change in me. And I will say this again. Let us not spend too much time worrying about the other person, because change anywhere is change everywhere is my belief. If you change you, the other person has to make adjustment to deal with you, new you. Therefore, the best place to start the change is in me. Change anywhere, for me, is change everywhere, even in nature. So starting with the small change that you can in you, and the other people are going to have to start changing themselves. All right?
Yes, I want to agree with Alex about what is taking place. And, we should have more of this in our churches. Last night when I went home, I took up my phone and I called quite a few people to attend this morning. Actually, tell them about the breakfast, so they don't have to worry that they should come. I find this, what you're saying today, these are things that I see is happening right now, especially during this pandemic. A lady called me recently, and she told me that, what can our church do for her son, who is about 15 years old? And she pointed the boy to me, and she said she's having problem, and she don't know what to do. Yeah. And she said, what can our church do? Yeah. Now, the gentleman that was sitting across there, I knew him when he was well. Normal. I would like to find out what has happened to him.
Okay, yes. And recovering the loss, whether it is a person or a part of a person, is very difficult after they have reached a certain stage. But it is not impossible. It depends on how hard we are willing to work. Because like I said, if routine can be restored to a person's life, routine, that is sleep, wake, meal, activity, purposeful activity, water, contact with human beings and raising the outlook. If those routines can be restored, a lot of the physical things will start changing. And as a result of that combination of change, people can be restored. And I'll tell you this, I worked with from abroad actually, I worked with a young lady who had become psychotic. And I didn't get enough information from her about why she was not in reality anymore. And but I knew certain physical activities, such as massaging the feet in warm water. As simply as that, massaging the feet. And I encouraged her aunt to massage the young lady's feet in warm water. There is no more tender, well, not no more, but there are very few tender touch that is as affectionate as touching the feet. And she did that. I told her, stay away from I think, I believe. Quiz her on facts. And we worked with walking and staying active with all of those, hugging her, telling her how smart she is, all of that over and over. And within about 4 months, she was back. A lot is possible, but we have to commit a lot. We have to kind of forget ourselves and decide, I'm going to see if I can recover this one from the grips of the devil. Okay. Final.
I see that you quoted a lot from the DSM.
Yes.
Right. And, well, I don't know if I agree with everything in the DSM. But what I'm going to say is that, yes, counseling has its place. But there is also a downside to counseling.
Okay.
Right. especially like in the sexual arena, and with all the deviant behaviors that are happening now, and where the DSM sits with all of that. Because I have heard of persons whose children have a certain persuasion, and they take them to counseling for them to get some benefit. But instead of being benefited, the counselor seal that you know, you have to accept this is who you are, and so and so and so. So my encouragement to persons, if they are thinking about counseling, is to do it prayerfully, because there is always a downside to everything. So it's not, I'm not saying it's not good, but there is also a caution.
Yes. We, like anything else, anything else, the Bible, our belief in God is our final say. In everything. Nothing. Medical doctors sometimes not only prescribe the wrong medicine, but they sometimes kill us. Nobody believe that? So we approach everything through confidence in God and trusting in the Bible that He should have the final say. And that applies to mental health. As I said yesterday, there are some things in psychology I don't agree with. And I don't work with them. But so it is never going to override my belief. And when I do counseling, I bear in mind that God and the Bible and the spirit of prophecy are my leader and guide in whatever decision I make. And so, yeah, everything has to be approached with prayer, prayerfully making our decisions. But don't sit down and do nothing. No action is not an option here. We have to do something, and we listen to God. He will lead us to make the right choice. It's as simple as that. All right.
And just to say that persons, I believe, have to become intimate with themselves. They have to know and understand them first. 2, that there is a great power in the mind. And why do I say this now? Some persons who have been diagnosed with cancer, and they tell them that they have a year to live or 2 years. Sometimes they are doing well, but when the 2 year comes, they just start deteriorate. Because the conditioning of the mind, you understand, they believed. So the mind set itself that after 2 years, they're just going to get worse because of what they were told. And also, you have to find what works for you as an individual. So like for me, what I do, I have friends who I call my truth meter. So we have the discussion, and she said, boy, Colin, you shouldn't do that though. That little rough. And I will say to her that, Valerie, so and so and so. So, we talk about our issues, what took place, and we try to be honest with each other. So you have to find things that work for you, that can help you to navigate and to manage your life.
Yeah, in agreement. I will issue a caution here, though, that some of what happens with friends you have to be also careful of, because you and your friend can become so tight that you resist hurting each other, meaning you don't want to say it as black and white as it is. So you have to be careful of that. Yeah, but if it worked, the reason why God added certain things, if you look at the Old Testament, was not because that was it was where He wanted to go. I think I could branch, go on a limb and say, it was God. If you read Exodus chapter 20, you will find that God did not intend to talk to Moses, talk to the children of Israel through Moses. After the 10 Commandments was given, He told Moses to gather them together so I could talk to them face to face. And they said what we saw was so terrible and frightening, we don't want Him to come near us because we might die. One of the reasons was that they had cleansed their exterior, but their mind was not cleansed. They had not let go a lot of the Egyptian stuff. So as a result, God couldn't talk to them face to face because they didn't want it. So some of the things that we're dealing with here, if we could deal with it member to member in a kind, compassionate way, maybe some of the others, the professional stuff would not be necessary. But the truth is, though, that some are in places where it's going to take professionals to sort them out. And that is where that comes in. Yes?
Final question. I'm going to ask my question, my concern, based on what you said earlier. But what you just said about Moses and God a while ago and the Children of Israel also sort of answer my question. Because you said earlier that once you change in yourself, those around you would see the change.
Yes.
But some people, when you read and study the Bible and to make a change in life, others don't see it as being a change. They see you become negative.
Yeah.
You become antisocial.
Yeah.
Whatever. But you have studied. Because, for example, I have said to myself, for this year, 2022, I want to be humble. I want to try more just to be humble and walk with God as Enoch. Okay. But others don't see that way. Others see that become self-centered, So, and as I answered a while ago about the children of Israel, because when they saw what happened when God gave Moses the commandment, they did not forget the past. Okay. They still all the same way. And it affect them. What you find in the church now, that people still hold the past against other people. Yes. And don't move on.
Okay, yeah, good point. Now, so you prompt me to add to this. Change anywhere is change everywhere. However, sometimes the change is negative. But they can't remain the same. So that is why you see when you get better, some people get worse. Change has to happen because they can't deal with you as before because the past, you no longer exists. Yes. So it's either that the person is going to embrace the positive thing or the person is going to get worse in order to deal with the positive thing they find in you. But change, they can't remain the same. All right, so I'm being told that we are out of time and we should stop here. So thank you again, and I want to say a very, very great thank you to the young men in the AV, the communication department. It's church, but can we give them an applause? And thank you, and may God bless us. I hope the developments that we're looking for will happen guided by God so that things can be different in the future. Amen?
I am sure that we have been blessed, and I'm sure that our minds have been fortified. And no, we cannot be over blessed, Elder. We are ever blessed. Let me extend on our behalf a special thank you to our presenter, Elder Erith Bennett, for carrying us through such splendid presentations, starting from Friday into Sabbath evening, and then now on Sunday morning. Indeed, Elder, we appreciate what you have done for us by sharing this information with us so that we can understand even more our mental health and the signs that we can look and observe and help to prevent ourselves from being drastically affected in a negative way, as well as we have gotten some signs to, when we see them, we can tell others that this will drive you along the path that you should not go. What really sticks with me is the fact that we need to eat on time. That's always been said. And get adequate rest, right? It is very important And for persons who are studying like myself, that spends most of the time trying to complete the assignments, you know, I know what Elder is talking about when he speaks about having adequate rest. So I just want to say a big thank you for coming down and for sharing with us. And I'm sure that even the persons who are online would want me to thank you as well, because they have benefited greatly. And you are online at this time, you have benefited greatly. Just show by indicating an emoji to show that indeed you are happy for these presentations. The good thing about this, Elder, is that in this time and in this space, the information is captured online. So some of the things that might be we didn't get so well, we can always go back and view the recording, the stream, and help to fortify ourselves in better ways so that we can, of course, be of greater service. I also want to thank you, Elder, for the gifts that will be given in short order. And this gift is going to be given to all those who have registered early. In fact, there was a challenge that was given for the first 20 persons who registered that they will be given a gift for this morning. And I'm seeing some persons saying, me already. All right, so we shall see, all right, who these persons are. So at this time, I'm going to be inviting Sister Patterson. It's you? Oh, okay. And Sister Barnes to come at this time and to hand out these gifts that were given, that were provided as well by our presenter. So we want to thank you as well for so ably donating these gifts as well. All right, I will allow you to speak with him off here, all right, in that regards, and to see what he... Oh, I'm told that, you're right, I'm told that persons are now indicating online, saying thanks to you, Elder. So, all right, hold a sec.
Okay, Elder McLaren says, Taylor, thanks, Elder Bennett. Says, awesome presentation. Sister Bogle says, awesome presentation. Elder, thank you very much. You feel much better. Lorna Salman says, thank you so much, Elder. Elena Thomas says, thanks so much for your valuable presentation, Elder. Elder Erith. This was a valuable, needed, and useful information. God bless you.
All right, so we recognize that all over, Elder. And I'm sure that as soon as other persons view this stream, of course, those thanks will be coming in. So continue to do the good work for the Master. Continue to make those indelible impression upon those who you are counseling. And continue to come back and to share with us at the appropriate time. Thank you very much.
Just before Elder leaves, I am going to make these, since he's upstairs, I'm going to make these this presentation because it's to the church. So this book, it's Creation, Health, God's 8 Principles for Living Life to the Fullest. And it's a seminar personal study guide. and he wants this to stay in the church. So, and he hopes that someone will act upon it, have regular seminars to help us to live healthy lives with the 8 principles: nutrition, outlook, interpersonal relationships, trust in God, activity, environment, rest, and choice. So the elder will know which department this goes. And also a cookbook by Barbara Watson. It includes secrets for a longer and stronger life. And I hope the church will utilize these 2 books so that we can have better health. So that is on behalf of Brother Bennett. He has not told you that his wife is a part of all of this, but unfortunately she could not be here. No, but she was instrumental in getting some of these gifts that we will be receiving. Or more, he said more stuff. So we also want to say thanks to Sister Bennett. Paula Masco Bennett, she should be coming up sometimes. I don't know if you will see her, but she should be coming up sometime this week. All right, so we say thanks to her for her contribution to this program. Okay. I'm inviting Sister Graham, Karen Graham, to come and make a presentation.
Love and kindness are not wasted. They always make a difference. They bless the one who receives them, and they bless the giver. I just want to take this opportunity to thank you on behalf of my son for your generosity, Mr. Bennett. God bless you. Somebody take a picture now.
Okay, so we gave out a challenge. The first 20 persons that registered for the seminar this morning would receive a prize. So we're trying to keep to our promise. If your name is called but you are not present here, unfortunately you will not receive the prize. So if you registered and you are here, then a prize is a gift. Sorry, not a prize. A gift is yours. No, it's a thought that counts. So whatever it is, in everything the Bible says, give thanks. All right. So I am going to call the names, and as soon as your name is called, you will come up. You stand. I'll call the first 20 names. Jonathan Barnes, Caswell Rodney, Michelle, is Michelle here? You have to stand. Yes, Caswell Rodney, Michelle Mel Hedo. Oh, she's not here. Marcia Murray, Ann McDermott, Cassandra Kelly, Arlene Barnes, Troyton Beckford, Carleen Anderson Douglas, Isidona Pattison, and my children told me I am disqualified, so Nathan Barnes, Rodane Kelly, Veron White Nelson, Delroy Edman. Delroy Edman was here. He helped us to prepare the breakfast. He had to leave, so I still think we will give him his. Tessian Williams, Sharon Kidd, Leslie Williams. All the persons whose names were called, please stand. We will come. No, the registration, it was not online, but for the persons to be in the sanctuary. It was made clear that you have to be here on yes. So now, there are some persons, there are other persons who are here. Okay, let us get finished with the you get umbrella. Your umbrella. You have, if you have some for some men. All right. For the persons who are here, whose names were not called, I'm going to ask you to stand now. And there's a single gift that you will receive, everyone. Whether your name was called or not. Please keep standing. And as you see, our shirt, or it's our exercise group, is out in numbers this morning. Usually we would go out on Sunday morning to exercise. Unfortunately, well, it's fortunately we were able to come here to the presentation, so we are in support, and I want to say thanks to all the members of the JOB squad. We exercise every week. They are well represented. Jonathan Erith Barnes. He's the coach. We're coming up just. I am hoping that everyone who is here this morning will be able to come back out for meeting. I know it is challenging for meetings. The series, the campaign, it's the Yes campaign. I kept saying the Yes series, not remembering that is, it is Yes, Youth Evangelistic Series. So it can't be Yes series. It's the Yes campaign. But I have been saying it wrong. All right, so we have come to the end of a very good session. I want to thank you all for being a part of it and sharing. And we hope that what we have learned, that we will implement, if not all, some, and we will have better lives, healthy, spiritual lives. God bless you.
All right, at this time we are going to be standing for prayer. Just want to let you know that we continue along the health emphasis vein, and come this Sabbath at 4 p.m. we are going to be having another health presentation. So we are asking you to get in gear, to be on board, to be here. We are going to be speaking about obesity and diabetes. And our presenter is Dr. Earl McLaren. He will be here, friend of Elder Erith. He will be here and he will be doing a presentation as well. You'd have heard Elder Bennett spoke about the twinning of the families. Right. So we are having twin presentations during the same week. May God bless you. I'm going to be asking, I'm not seeing Elder Bennett, to come at this time and to pray the final prayer for this session. Thank you.
I'd like to thank my big brother and my sister, Erith and Isadona, for their presentations today. Let us pray. Father, we thank you so much for this, for the meal you have given to us in learning about mental health. We thank you for the presenter and his family, for the sacrifice they have made to share this knowledge with us. We ask that you may help us to implement them in our lives, not just to remain information, but to put them in practice. May we all experience better mental health and share and help those who are around us to have better mental health as well. Thank you for your blessings. May we continue to have a good and productive day in Jesus' name.